What if everything you thought was safe suddenly turned dangerous? Tonight, I'm about to reveal secrets that will change the way you see the world forever. Stay with me, because what happens next will shock you. That was the first thing he said when two local police officers suddenly confronted him at a gas station while he stood in full military uniform. His camouflage was crisp. His boots were polished. The name tag on his chest read Gale, and the U.S. Army badge shined brightly on his shoulder. He was no ordinary citizen. He was a decorated American soldier, a man who had put his life on the line for his country more times than he could count. That morning had started like any other. The skies were clear, the roads were quiet, and the air carried a calmness you only feel in small American towns. David was driving home after returning from an assignment. His mother's birthday was the next day, and he hadn't told her he was coming. It was supposed to be a surprise. Just a quick stop at a gas station to fill up the tank, grab a coffee, and give her a call to say he was running late, setting up the perfect entrance. He never made that call. As he stepped out of his car and inserted his credit card into the fuel pump, he noticed a police cruiser slowly pulling in. He thought nothing of it at first. This was a quiet town, after all, and police presence wasn't unusual. But then, two white officers stepped out, looked directly at him, and walked over with purpose. "Sir, we need to see your ID," one of them said. David turned to face them, surprised but cooperative. "Of course," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and calmly handing over his military identification. The officer looked at it, frowned, and handed it to his partner. The second officer didn't even look at the card for more than 2 seconds before asking a chilling follow-up. "Do you have any other ID?" David was confused. "That's my government-issued military ID. I'm active duty. What's going on?" No answer. The second officer stepped closer. "You match the description of someone we're looking for." David blinked. "What description?" "Suspicious individual, dark clothing, loitering." David looked down at his military uniform, then back up at the officer. "You think someone in full U.S. Army gear is loitering?" The officers didn't laugh. They didn't explain. Instead, one of them reached for his handcuffs. The click of metal rang out loud enough to make nearby customers at the station stop and look. "What do you think you're doing?" David asked again, this time louder. "I'm a soldier. I've done nothing wrong." But it didn't matter. He was black. He was standing alone. And in the eyes of these officers, that was apparently enough. They placed the cuffs on him right there, in broad daylight. His arms were pulled behind his back. His head was held high, but the embarrassment on his face was clear. People began pulling out their phones. A woman inside the gas station pressed her face against the window, recording the incident. A teenage boy shouted from across the street, "Why are you arresting a soldier?" A man filling his tank said, "That's ridiculous. He didn't do anything." But the officers ignored them all. David didn't resist. He stayed calm. Years of military discipline taught him that patience, not panic, wins the battle. One of the officers, now visibly uncomfortable with the attention, said, "We're just doing our job." David looked him straight in the eye. "Your job is to protect the people, not profile them." By now, more cars had pulled in, and the crowd was growing. What was supposed to be a quick pit stop had become a live public display of racial injustice. A black man, a U.S. Army sergeant, being handcuffed like a criminal, with no explanation, no evidence, and no respect. Despite having no probable cause, the officers snapped the cold metal cuffs onto Sergeant David Gale's wrists in full view of the public. The sharp click echoed across the gas station like a gunshot, loud, shocking, final. Gas pumps went silent. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. At first, people thought it might be a movie scene or a training drill. After all, who arrests a man in a U.S. Army uniform at a gas station? But reality hit fast. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't Hollywood. This was real. And it was wrong. A woman in a blue hoodie standing by pump 3 slowly took out her phone and began recording. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "Why are they arresting a soldier?" she whispered to the man next to her. A man in a truck, still holding his coffee cup, shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, "You've got the wrong guy. His army. What's wrong with you?" More phones came out. Cameras were rolling. Eyes were watching. And still, the officers showed no explanation, no respect, no remorse. Sergeant Gale didn't flinch. His military training kicked in. He stood tall, back straight, even though his hands were locked behind him. His calm demeanor said one thing: I've been through worse. But deep inside, it was a different kind of battle. He had survived IED blasts. He had marched through enemy zones. He had watched fellow soldiers fall in combat. But nothing stung like this. Nothing hurt quite like standing in his own country, wearing his nation's uniform, and being treated like a criminal for the color of his skin. He scanned the faces around him. Some looked shocked. Some looked angry. Others looked ashamed. Not of him, but of the officers. Still handcuffed, Sergeant Gale calmly asked again, "Why am I being arrested?" There was a long pause. The officers looked at each other. One of them, avoiding eye contact, finally replied in a flat tone, "Suspicious behavior." That was it. No explanation. No details. Just two cold words meant to silence him and move on. Suspicious? He was dressed in full U.S. Army camouflage. His ID had already been checked. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't running. He was simply standing at a gas station, pumping fuel like any other American. But apparently, to them, being black in uniform was enough to raise suspicion. The injustice was visible, palpable, and now it was being recorded. A woman shouted, "He served this country. Is that suspicious?" Another man walked closer, hands raised in protest. "You're embarrassing yourselves. Let him go." But the officers remained rigid. One of them told the crowd to step back. "We're handling it," he said. But they weren't. They were making it worse. Even a few bystanders began whispering among themselves, "Is this even legal? He didn't do anything wrong. Should we call someone?" One little girl tugged her mother's hand and pointed at Sergeant Gale. "Mommy, why is the soldier in handcuffs? Isn't he a hero?" Her mother looked away, unable to answer. In that moment, Sergeant Gale felt more alone than he ever had on a battlefield. Not because of danger, but because of the silence, the disbelief, the betrayal. These officers weren't strangers in a foreign land. They were supposed to be his own, his fellow Americans, protectors of the law, defenders of justice. And yet here they were, humiliating him on nothing but assumption and bias. But Gale didn't let rage win. He didn't yell. He didn't fight. He stood tall, heart pounding, mind sharp, planning his next move. And that move would change everything. Sergeant David Gale stood silently, the handcuffs still tight around his wrists. He felt the weight of the injustice more than the metal itself. But unlike most people in this position, David had one powerful advantage. He knew exactly what to do. He turned to the officers and calmly said, "I'd like to make a phone call." The officers glanced at each other. One raised an eyebrow. "To who?" he asked with a sarcastic tone. "Family," the other added. David didn't answer. He just said again, more firmly, "One phone call. That's my right." After a moment's pause, one of the officers handed over a phone, assuming it was just another emotional call to a parent, a lawyer, or maybe even someone to bail him out. But Sergeant Gale didn't call any of those people. He called Lieutenant Colonel Maria Lopez, his commanding officer, mentor, and someone who took justice as seriously as service. He said when she picked up, "I've just been detained by 2 local officers while in uniform. No probable cause. I'm at Hillcrest Gas on Route 14. There was a long pause. Then just one response. "We're on our way." 10 minutes passed. 10 long, awkward, tense minutes. During that time, the bystanders continued recording. Some began live streaming the incident. Others made phone calls of their own, to news stations, civil rights organizations, even the mayor's office. The atmosphere shifted from confusion to outrage. Then came the sound of roaring engines. 2 sleek, black SUVs rolled into the station, stopping with precision. The driver's doors swung open, and out stepped Lieutenant Colonel Maria Lopez, dressed sharply in her service uniform, sunglasses on, expression unreadable. Behind her were 2 military legal advisors, briefcases in hand, expressions equally serious. Gasps filled the air. Someone whispered, "That's military brass." The officers who had arrested Sergeant Gale visibly stiffened. One took a step back. The other quickly looked down at his bodycam, suddenly aware of how much was being recorded. Lieutenant Colonel Lopez walked straight up to them, not breaking stride. She didn't introduce herself with small talk. She didn't ask for pleasantries. She asked one question, her voice clear, powerful, and unwavering. On what legal grounds did you detain my soldier? Silence. The officers glanced at each other, then at Gale, then at the crowd. Well, he was acting suspicious. Lopez raised a hand and cut him off. No, he wasn't. He was in full uniform, identified himself, provided military ID. And according to every federal statute protecting active duty personnel, you had no authority to detain him without clear criminal cause. Her legal team stepped forward, opening folders and pulling out documents. This is a violation of Title 10 of the U.S. Code, Section 1031, one of the lawyers explained. You've not only abused your authority, you violated the rights of a federal soldier in uniform. The crowd was silent. The officers' faces turned pale. One began to mumble something about protocol, but the lawyer shut it down with cold clarity. Everything you've done is on video. Your body cams, civilian phones, witnesses. You detained a U.S. soldier in front of the public for no lawful reason. That's not a misunderstanding. That's misconduct. By now, the precinct's phones were ringing nonstop. Calls were coming in from the base, local media, and advocacy groups. The video had already reached viral status. This wasn't just an embarrassment anymore. It was a legal disaster. Lieutenant Colonel Lopez looked at Gale, still handcuffed, and then at the officers. Remove those cuffs. Now. The silence broke. One officer fumbled for the keys and quickly unlocked them, not daring to make eye contact. Gale rubbed his wrists, calm as ever. But the tide had turned, and those two officers had no idea just how much worse it was about to get. It didn't take long. By the time Sergeant David Gale got home that night, his phone was buzzing nonstop. His face, still in uniform, still handcuffed, was everywhere. On social media, on news channels, on YouTube thumbnails. His quiet act of standing tall in the face of injustice had been captured by dozens of witnesses. And now, the world was watching. The video had gone viral. The headline spreading like wildfire across the internet read, "Black soldier wrongfully arrested while in uniform. Police under fire." Within 24 hours, the video had hit over 12 million views across platforms. News outlets like CNN, NBC, and independent creators on TikTok and Instagram were all covering it. Hashtags like #JusticeForSergeantGale, #racial profiling in uniform, and #hero not threat were trending worldwide. The internet was outraged. People from all backgrounds, veterans, civilians, activists, even celebrities, voiced their anger. How could a decorated soldier, wearing the uniform of the very nation he served, be arrested in broad daylight like a common criminal? The answer was ugly, and it struck a nerve with the country. Racial bias still ran deep, even against those who swore to defend the flag. By mid-morning, the heat reached City Hall. The mayor called an emergency press conference. With a grave expression and a wall of reporters in front of him, he stood at the podium and began. What happened to Sergeant David Gale is a failure. A failure in judgment. A failure in training. And most of all, a failure in basic human respect. We are deeply sorry. He promised a full investigation, immediate review of arrest procedures, and sensitivity training across all departments. But it was already too late for damage control. Because by afternoon, the body cam footage leaked. It didn't just confirm what the public feared, it exposed so much more. The footage showed everything. The casual way the officers approached Gale. Their dismissive tone when he offered his military ID. The sarcastic remark one of them made. Yeah, uniform doesn't mean innocent. But what really sealed their fate was what came after. As one officer cuffed Gale, thinking his MIC was muted, he muttered, "I don't care what patch is wearing. They all act the same." Those 9 words exploded across the internet like dynamite. That was it. There was no defending it. No spinning it. No PR trick strong enough to undo what the world had just heard. The police department scrambled. They released a short statement calling it a misunderstanding during a routine check. But no one was buying it. Internal Affairs immediately stepped in. The investigation moved fast. They interviewed witnesses, reviewed footage, and spoke to military legal teams. Within 48 hours, both officers were suspended without pay. The town's police chief tried to hold a press conference to calm the situation, but angry protesters gathered outside the station holding signs that read, "A soldier deserves respect. Wrong uniform. Right bias. Enough is enough." Public pressure only grew stronger. By the end of the week, the decision was made. Both officers were terminated from the force, officially fired on grounds of misconduct, racial profiling, and abuse of authority. The mayor issued another statement. "There is no place for racism in our town, especially not in our police force. We thank Sergeant Gale for his dignity, and we apologize for failing him." The fallout didn't stop there. The department faced lawsuits. The town council ordered a complete overhaul of police policies, and a federal task force even stepped in to monitor future activity. But while the city scrambled to clean up the mess, Sergeant Gale stayed silent, dignified, calm, and steady. He didn't ask for fame. He didn't want revenge. He simply wanted justice, and now the nation was helping deliver it. Sergeant David Gale didn't want revenge. He didn't demand apologies, lawsuits, or headlines. What he wanted was simple: respect. And more importantly, he wanted change. He had already fought for his country in deserts, jungles, and war zones. But this time, the battlefield was different. It wasn't across an ocean. It was right here at home, in a place where a man in uniform should have been honored, not handcuffed. When reporters surrounded him days after the incident, eager for a dramatic quote or an angry outburst, Sergeant Gale did something none of them expected. He remained calm. And then he said something that would be shared, reposted, and quoted for years to come. "I didn't fight for this country to be treated like a threat in my own uniform. But I also didn't call to punish anyone. I called to stand for what's right." The moment was powerful. There was no yelling, no anger, just truth. That single quote made its way into classrooms, political speeches, and even military leadership seminars. It was printed on posters, turned into tweets, and aired on national TV. Why? Because it reminded the nation of something we too often forget. Dignity is stronger than rage, and justice is more powerful when delivered with grace. Because of his strength under pressure, Sergeant Gale became more than just a name in the news. He became a symbol. A symbol of silent resistance. A symbol of how to lead through chaos. A symbol of what it means to stand for justice, with both your feet on the ground and your head held high. The military took notice. Just weeks after the incident, Gale received a letter from the Department of Defense. It was short but meaningful. He had been promoted. Along with his new rank, he was also awarded the Medal of Civic Courage, a rarely given honor recognizing service members who defend not just the country, but the values the country is built upon: equality, dignity, and justice. In the months that followed, Gale was invited to speak at town halls, military academies, and high schools. But the most notable invitation came from an unexpected place: the mayor's office. The same mayor who had once scrambled to handle a public scandal now stood beside Gale at a racial justice reform event, attended by police, teachers, and city leaders. Gale stepped up to the podium, not as a victim, but as a leader. He didn't speak for long, but his words carried weight. "This isn't just about me. It's about every young person who gets treated like a threat because of how they look. It's about creating a system where a soldier, a student, a stranger, anyone, is given respect before judgment." His speech sparked conversations. Real conversations. Soon, police departments across the state began retraining officers on how to engage with military personnel and people of color. A new community task force was formed to monitor racial bias in public institutions. Even local schools created new curriculum modules based on his story, teaching students about civil rights, military respect, and the importance of calm leadership in the face of injustice. A history teacher at the local high school later said, "Kids listen to Gale's story because it's real. Because he didn't scream, he stood tall." Sergeant Gale didn't ask for attention. He didn't chase the spotlight. But by standing still, by doing the right thing when everything around him went wrong, he changed a town. And maybe, just maybe, he helped change a country. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If it made you think, if it made you feel, let's make sure it's never forgotten.